or welcome back to my channel. Today, I wanted to do a fun video. I'll be rating and ranking 3 4th generation girl groups selca skills. These 3 groups will be sserafim, itzy, and aespa. I created a rubric for me to use to grade all of the members. Once I add all the points each member gets, they'll get their final ranking individually. After that, I'll add up all their points together and find the mean, average, of that to determine which group takes the best selcas. As for the rubric, this is what I'll be basing the ratings of: frequency, which will add +3 points. The frequency will be based on how frequently they upload, mainly on Instagram. Since 2 groups in this video have Instagram, I'll primarily look at how much itzy and sserafim members upload on their Instagram accounts. For if I mainly looked at their Twitter account, I would check Weber's, but ever since the update, I have no clue how to use it. Angles, which will add +3 points. Angles will be based on if they do a variety of angles. Some examples would be super high angles, lower angles, and titled angles. You get the idea, LOL. This is mainly for whether I see an idol doing the same angle every time. Poses will add +3 points. Poses will be whether they add hearts or peace signs or if they do different faces. Landscape and portrait, which will add +1 point. Finally, landscape and portrait will be whether the idols like to upload selcas from both shots. Before we get into the video, I want to go over what a selca is briefly. There may be a couple of newer K-pop fans here that don't know what a selca is. Selcas are selfies. It's a combination of the words self and camera. Also, remember that these are all my opinions and that this video isn't that serious or that deep vllo. Also, please know that this video isn't meant to be taken too seriously lol. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the video. I gave Yujin 1 point for frequency, 1 point for angles, 1 point for poses, and none for landscape. Yujin barely uploads selcas. When she does the same angle, tilts, and makes the same faces. If she does do a pose, it will be a peace sign, though. I gave Zuha 2 points for frequency, 1 point for angles, 1 point for poses, and none for landscape and portrait. Zuha isn't super bad about uploading them. She uploads a reasonable amount, but it isn't as much as other members. Also, I gave her 1 point for angle and another for poses because, as you can see, she mostly does the same thing in every selca. I gave Chiwon 2 points for frequency, 1 point for angles, 1 point for poses, and no points for landscape and portrait. We love Poo-Poo here, and her selcas are so cute, but her selca variety is scarce. Chiwon does many of the same angles and poses, usually with the camera to the left angle or super up-close photos. They're all super cute, though. She also uploads selcas pretty frequently, not as often as other idols on this list, but a lot more than others. I gave Karina 2 points for frequency, 1.5 points for angles, 1 point for poses, and no points for landscape and portrait. Many of Karina's selcas have a head tilt to the right, but some other angles, like some to the front or some that are above her a lot, if that makes sense. Nonetheless, they're cute, and I like them, but most look the same. For frequency, I gave Sakura 1. For angles, I gave her a 1. For poses, I gave her a 3 and no points for landscape and portrait. So firstly, Sakura barely uploads selcas, which is so sad because she does. Oh, she shows up and shows out. Well yes. However, Sakura does many of the same angles. She usually does the camera to the left with a head tilt. However, Sakura does a lot of poses and makes different faces in her selcas, so I rated poses high. Gets 2 points for frequency, 1 point for angle, 2 points for poses, and no points for landscape and portrait. I love Girl's selcas, but as you can see, she does many of the same angles with the camera pointed to the left. However, she does a lot of poses, like making peace signs or putting her face on her chin. I also gave Gil a high rating for frequency because I think she's one of the IVE members who uploads the most selcas. 1.5 points for frequency, 1 point for angles, 3 points for poses, and no points for landscape and portrait. Wonyoung uploads a good amount of selcas. She's not one of the members that uploads the least amount of selcas. LOL. As for angles, she does most of the same angles with the camera in the middle of her face. However, she does a lot of different poses and makes different faces, so I rated that section high. LOL. Ningning gets 1 point for frequency, 3 points for angles, 2 points for poses, and no points for landscape. I gave Ningning 1 point for frequency because she barely posts selfies even though she eats every time she does. I gave Ningning 3 points for angles because the camera is always in different spots. I gave Ningning 2 points for poses because she makes different faces and sometimes does different poses, like putting her face in her hand or doing a pose where she shows off her nails. Licia gets 3 points for frequency, 2 points for angles, 2 points for poses, and no points for landscape and portrait. Licia sat in Ray Selca University because her selcas have greatly improved since her debut. Licia also uploads her selcas pretty frequently, which is cool. She does a lot of different angles, like some close-ups or some that are high up. She also sometimes does heart or peace sign poses, which are cute. Licia's a cutie patootie. Liz gets 1 point for frequency, 3 points for angles, 2 points for poses, and 1 point for landscape and portrait. I gave Liz 3 points for angles because she does a lot of different angles. I also gave her 2 points for poses because she'll sometimes do a heart or wave to the camera, which is cute. I gave Liz 1 point for the landscape because, as you can see, I found a couple of selcas of her that were in the landscape. However, Liz got a low score for frequency because Sis barely uploads. Upload more Pookie. I gave Yunchi 2 points for frequency, 3 points for angles, 2 points for poses, and 1 point for landscape. Yunchi uploads kind of frequently and has a ton of different angles. As you can see by the preview in the photo, she did 3 different angles like a period queen. She also sometimes does poses like peace signs, which are cute. As you can see, I found a selca of her taking a photo in landscape, so I added a point for that section as well. I gave Winter 2 points for frequency, 3 points for angles, 2.5 points for poses, and no points for landscape. I feel like Winter's selfies before didn't eat as much as they do now, as she serves every time. She pulls out her phone and takes a selfie. She uploads frequently, and she always shows up with different angles. Sometimes, she'll do different poses and make different faces as well. I gave Giselle 3 points for frequency, 2 points for angles, 3 points for poses, and 1 point for landscape. If there's one thing about Giselle, she's about to eat up any selfie she takes. She uploads selcas all the time. She also has a good variety of poses. However, she does take a lot of selcas with the camera just centering her face. Also, she does a variety of poses as well, like her selcas are so early 2000s coded, LOL. Also, I added a point for landscape and portrait because she does upload landscape selcas as well. I gave Ray 3 points for frequency, 2 points for angels, 3 points for poses, and 1 point for landscape. Everything I said about Giselle applies to Ray, so I'm not repeating all that, but her selcas always eat down like period. I I gave Yoonjin 3 points for frequency, 3 points for angles, 3 points for poses, and 1 point for landscape. Again, everything I said about Giselle applies to Yoonjin. Her selcas always eat like when Yoonjin opened her Instagram. She knew what she was doing. She always uploads her selcas on there, and she eats every single time. So, let's talk about which group takes the best selcas. As stated earlier, I found the mean, which is the average, of all 3 groups. So in 3rd place is sserafim, with an average of 6.2. Group in 2nd place is IVE, with an average of 6.25. This makes aespa, with an average of 6.75, the group that takes the best selcas. Anyway, that's all for today's video. Remember that this is not that serious of a video and that this is all my opinion. Alright, bye.